Ladies and gentlemen, you are on African Hour. African Hour is a program that has been on the air for since 2000. All our guests are special, but today's guest may not be known to our African audience, but worldwide, she doesn't need any introduction. I call her Grandma Jane Elliott. By our African traditions, we have to respect culture and also respect our elders. So, Grandma Jane, you are welcome on African Hour. Welcome to African Hour, a program that brings truth to light. It is a blessing to be in your presence, for you to share your wisdom with my humble audience. I am through the Nkimbe, host and producer of African Hour for over 20 years. I was born in Mankon, Bamenda, English Cameroon, Central Africa. I am married to my very religious, beautiful wife, Kien Kimbeng, for 28 years. We are blessed with four lovely, humble children. Dr. Manka Kimbeng, who is with us, the Nkimben, who is also with us now. Anye Nkimben is my third son, and Fru Nkimben. I live in Lowell, Massachusetts, the all-American city. Grandma Jane, welcome to African Hour.
Wait a minute. You don't realize how complimented and how flattered and how pleased I am to be invited to be on this program. This is absolutely one of the high points of my life. Make no mistake about that. For you, who was born evidently and raised in the country from which we all came, from the continent from which we all came, who are willing to recognize that I might have even a tiny bit of wisdom, I'm absolutely tremendously flattered by that. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.
It's going to kill us.
I like to pause and said, you are watching African Hour, and our extraordinary guest today is Grandma Jane Elliott. Thank you again, Grandma Jane Elliott, for your wonderful wisdom. And again, I want to reassure my audience and viewers that African Hour brings the best and is balanced and fair. Well, Grandma, I know in one of our exchanges, you were not very happy when I say us Africans emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. But I would like to say that I say Africans should emancipate ourselves from mental slavery and inferiority of the white man. Our system of education in African countries is structured on admiration of European standard.
Ah.
It is worse in the French-speaking countries.
Mm-hmm.
Why must an African study European history, not African history? And speak of why the African want to recently, some of us who have had the opportunity to cross the ocean and study or live in the white man's world are becoming today the white man in Africa when we go to Africa. Could you elaborate about that? Because I think that you speaking, it makes a lot to people who look like me from the continent. Because if you see the migration of people dying in the ocean and coming over here, you really wonder that we have so much abundance and everything in Africa, as you always talk. And I believe that when I listen to you, I am inspired, and I am Black, and I am proud to come from Africa. So with that, Grandma, it's with what I've
Think of,
talked.
but think of the influence we from the United States of America must have if we have told you what you are allowed to call yourself. You will be what we say you are. You aren't Black. I can see the black in your shirt, and I can see that your skin doesn't match that black. You aren't Black, and I'm not white. You can see my hair. This is white. This ain't white. This is spotted. It is not white. But you have taken on the role that we have assigned to you. And you send a child to the dictionary. At third grade, you start using the dictionary. You send the child to the dictionary. And the teacher says to the little boy who comes in, oh, another little black boy. And the kid goes to the dictionary, looks up the word black, and sees savage and evil. You have set that kid on a path, and you know what that teacher expects that kid to be. Now, maybe you think that doesn't matter, but words matter. Words are the most powerful weapon devised by humankind. As long as we are allowed to tell you what you are going to be called, then we'll also be allowed to tell you how you're going to live, how you're going to sing, how you're going to dance, how you're going to eat, how you're going to legislate, what you are expected to be. And as long as we can call Australia the land down under, we can expect them to act like the land down under. I go to Australia. I have gone to Australia several times. And when I go to Australia, oh my Lord, they have the map, what I think is upside down. And they say, no, we're tired of being called the land down under. Doesn't matter whether yeah. And have you seen this map? If you think we don't mess with your mind, look at this map. Have you ever seen this map before?
No.
Oh, that's what I thought. See this little thing, Greenland up here, this teeny tiny thing? On the Mercator map, Greenland is a great big, huge thing lying here in the middle of these two continents. The Greenland map was made by Mercator. The Pope told Mercator to make a map that showed the spread of Christianity. So Mercator did that. So on the Mercator map, Greenland is bigger than South America on the Mercator map. And yet, on the legend at the bottom of the map, it says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland. On the Mercator map, the equator is 2/3 of the way down the map. On the Peters map, the equator is halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. If you don't do anything else for your African students and your African people and the people who are from, and we are all from Africa. We are all from Africa. That's a fact. So we've got to start teaching the truth instead of teaching this lie. Get a copy of the Peters projection map. Hang it wherever you have to give a discussion, or in every room, every office in your building. Hang a copy of the Peters projection map so that students of color and we are all students of color because we all came from Africa, but so that all of them can see the truth about the size, the shape, and the location of the land masses on the earth. And occasionally hang one like this. Do that, just hang it like this. And people will say, well, why'd you do it? Why not? Say to that, yeah, why not? Say to that person, what is up? And they'll say, well, no, what is up? You're standing on the ground. What is up? Well, up is up. Well, what is up? Up is away from the center of the earth. And what is down? Well, down is toward the center of the earth. No matter where you are on the map, up is away from the center of the earth and down is toward the center of the earth. It doesn't matter where you are on the Bloomin' map. You understand that? See, I am really a threat to college students, so I'm not allowed to be there because of this kind of thing. We have taught the wrong map since the 1600s. We can, and you watch the newsmen reporting the news, and behind them is a Mercator map. That is continuing the conditioning. That's what education is in this country. It is continued conditioning. And it's conditioning that says, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, hang around. If you're black, get back. If you're yellow, you're mellow. And if you're red, you're dead. And we have that verse.
Grandma,
and kids say it. Go ahead.
not to interrupt you.
You will.
Um, uh, uh, you know, I I was reading somewhere that the continental US, Europe, China, part of Russia can fit into Africa, into the
Yes.
whole of
Yes.
Africa.
And I have
Why?
that here. I have that here in my house someplace. You want me to run and get it?
Well, no, let's just talk, man.
Okay.
I know that seeing is believing, but hearing from you is more than seeing. Could you explain why the map of Africa will be smaller than this other
Be,
continents?
be, because you can't think you're great if you don't prove it with the things you should teach in school. You start before they're born teaching that the United States, and we call this America. You have to realize that America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. The citizens of all those countries are Americans. But we are so arrogant that we call the United States of America America because we're freaking lazy. We should call ourselves the United States of America because the most important word in that title is the word united. And from 2016 till 2020, we had a president who tried to divide us. He was determined to divide us, to separate us, and he has done that. And we are now trying to get back to the fist. We're now this, and we've got to be this if we're going to survive. It is a part of our conditioning. We call ourselves America as if this is all there was. My father didn't know that until his friends came back from fighting the Second World War in the European theater of war. And he would say, well, you American guys. And those guys would say, wait a minute, Mr. Jennison, you need to know that we weren't the only people who were Americans over there. What are you talking about? People in Mexico are part of America too. And then they started to name the countries that are also part of America. And my dad was just shocked. It had never occurred to him. And this was in 1946. It had never occurred to him that he should call this country the United States of America. And if you don't want to use all those syllables, if you don't want to go that far, then just call it the US, because the two letters US spell us.
Wow.
Does that make sense to you?
I am learning.
But does that make sense to you?
Yes, yes, it
Yeah,
does.
see, it's arrogance and ignorance and laziness. We are spoiled Americans, while you are a struggling African American, because the fact that your skin is a different color from mine means a totally different thing to most of the people in this country than it means to me. To me, it means that you are indeed one of my 30th to 50th cousins, and you know more than I will ever know. And you came from a country. Right now, I'm reading the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. It's at home. I left it there. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. Have you read it?
No, like I
No.
told you, we were taught to read about European history, European wars, European everything, and instead of
I
us
know.
learning sciences and everything, we're
I know.
taught to. It's
The word race, that very thing came out of France, meaning a specific group of people. The word race, meaning a specific group of people, came out of France in 1580. Now think about that. You didn't know that, did you? This is not
no,
something. No. And why didn't you know that? Because you got educated in schools which taught about Europe and the United States and the perfect countries, instead of going to a school that taught about the place where humankind began. And that's where you came from. And that's where I came from. But I'm not allowed to say that out loud. If I trace my DNA back as far as I can, and I never have because I don't want to take the time and I don't want to spend the money, I know that some of my DNA came from a country in Africa. Because if it didn't, I'm either Martian or one of the other places out there, one of the other planets. I'm not from another planet. I'm from this one, and so are you. And the people who look like you need to realize that the people who look like me, the only reason there are white people is because there were black people.
That's powerful.
Well, that's the truth, because there were no white people who survived, but people from Africa left the continent of Africa and without any modern technology managed to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. Now think about that. And they did that before there were any white folks to tell them what to do, because the only reason I am this color is because those people, their bodies produce less and less melanin as they went farther and farther from the equator. They're exposed to less and less sunlight, so their bodies produce less and less melanin. So all I am is a black person who faded over hundreds of thousands of years. I'm perfectly happy with that, because that means that I was somewhere in my DNA. I have some things that are valuable that I have never been allowed to tap into, because I have been taught, just as you have been taught, that if it's white, it's right. It's wrong. Look at it this way. Without black people, there would be no white people, period. Without Jews, without the Jewish faith, there would be no Christians. The first 5 books of the Old Testament came out of the Torah. And without women, there would be no men. If we could just get rid of racism, anti-Semitism, and sexism, that would give us plenty of time to deal with our other isms and to practice all our other stupid isms. But first, we have to get rid of those 3. And in this country, we base how we treat those others as a model. We base how we use blacks. And the way we treat melanaceous and melanotic people is the way we are allowed to treat Jewish people, brownish people from Mexico, people who have disabilities, people whose sexual preferences are different from what we consider the norm. All we have to do is look at how we treat our black population, and we can copy that with those other people. And we do it on a daily basis.
Well, Grandma, thank you very much. That is voluminous. I'd like to pause and say you are watching African Hour, and our extraordinary guest today is Grandma Jane Elliott. Thank you again, Grandma Jane Elliott, for your wonderful wisdom. And again, I want to reassure my audience and viewers that African Hour brings the best and is balanced and fair. Dr. Manka, let me not monopolize this conversation. You are out there and in the community getting knowledge and giving knowledge. What do you have for Grandma?
I think a couple of the things you just mentioned, Grandma, a lot about how we're being educated and how things are happening. And I've heard a lot about structural racism and how a lot of all of these isms have been embedded into the systems and the policies. So it's looking to me like we need to change policy. And it's also something I've heard in the community. Whenever I go there, like, how can we change policy? So that's the question I'm thinking about, and I'm wondering about, how do we then change education policy? How do we then change other policies that are fostering all of these isms and kind of perpetuating all of the things that are happening? How can we change policy so that we can flip this around?
You do what Black women did in 2020. You vote. You choose the people that you know are going to put people in positions of power, like Mr. Trump, like Joe Biden did with his appointment to the Supreme Court. You know the woman that he appointed to the Supreme Court, that beautiful, beautiful melanaceous woman? Oh my God. Yes. And she was questioned by those 4 foolish men, those 4 tall white men. And she just sat there and looked at them and took a sip of water and looked at them and took a sip of water and answered their questions absolutely perfectly. And she didn't have to look in a book, and she didn't have to think about it. She had it all. She had it all. What we need to do is make sure our children who are of voting age go to the polls and vote for people who can prove that they're going to make a change in this country, that they're going to change the education system. Because what we have in education in this country today is not education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the duck deuce, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And you can't do that if you teach the children to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the words under God in it. Those weren't in there until Dwight Eisenhower allowed that to happen. That should never have happened. And the word right after under God in the pledge is the word indivisible. Now, the minute you put God in the pledge, you have divided the group who are saying the pledge into those who worship the right God and those who may not worship at all. That was a bad thing to do. You need to do things like say to students, and I did every year after I realized what was going on. If you don't want to say the words under God in the pledge in this room, you don't have to. They don't belong there, and you don't have to say them when you say the pledge. Well, parents were just infuriated by that until I explained to them how we're being used. We are being indoctrinated on a daily basis. We need to start educating instead of indoctrinating. You can do that. You have the power to do that. You're a melanaceous woman, and people will be scared to death of you because of what you know and what they don't know. And they know that, my God, how brilliant must you be that you became a doctor in the United States of America, where that isn't supposed to happen to anyone but white males. Am I exaggerating? Is this exactly what is happening?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is
but now
happening.
You look around, right. When television first came out, you didn't see what we call Black people on television in anything but ridiculous shows. And now there they are. They are getting more and more into that boob tube because the people who run television know that if they want an audience, they have to appeal to a whole different group of people. And here's another thing you have to think about. People talk about interracial marriages. You can't have an interracial marriage because there isn't such a thing. It's time for us to all start enjoying one another as we are, not as we are conditioned to believe we should be attracted to. It's time for us to realize that we're all members of the same race. We've been grossly miseducated. And you can start by telling your students and your children and your grandchildren, if you have some, or if you have some already, look, folks, that pale-faced woman over there, when they first came to this country, the natives of this country called them pale faces. That's what they are. They aren't white. They're pale faces. And they are pale because people from Africa moved to this country many, many years ago. And as they got farther from Africa, their skins faded. Those are some of your cousins. That pale face is one of your cousins. That pale face came from the same place that you did, but she doesn't know it.
Wow. Well, Grandma, thank you again. I will never stop thanking you. And the time that you are spending with us is precious, and we value it very much. But there is one more thing that I really want to hear from you, Grandma. When you look at this map of Africa, please, could you talk to our distant cousins and everyone that is back in Africa, because they will really want to find out what kind of a person are you, talking so much positive things about Africa when they always said Africa a third world continent, a black continent, and all that. If you have to explain, not really explain, or say whatever the
Look,
truth is about Africa, what would you say?
it is where human beings began. It is where human beings came up with the kinds of things that the rest of us have enjoyed and appreciated and never admitted that it came from the same place that we did, because we refused to admit that we came from Africa. We have this twisted idea in our heads that because we are we came from Europe, and I get letters. Oh, this week I've gotten a lot of letters from people who say, I'm engaged in indigenous erasure. Because I said, when Columbus came to this country, he wasn't met by Indians. That's no indigenous erasure. No, he wasn't met by Indians. He was met by people from Africa who had faded as a result of moving from the area of the equator farther and farther north. Those were Africans that he met when he came here. He didn't know that, and he thought he had reached India. He was trying to get to the east by sailing west, and he thought he was in the West Indies, so he called the people Indians. They were not Indians then, and they are not Indians now. They are the descendants of the first human being that populated every landmass on the face of the earth, and that was people who came from that huge continent. Do you realize how valuable the African culture is? Do you realize how valuable the African cultures are and how much we have gotten from the African cultures? You've got to get the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization before you will realize how fantastic those first people were. Did you know that 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, which would have been 6,000 years ago, people in the Nile Valley, as in Egypt, were doing cataract surgery with metal instruments 6,000 years ago? Did you know that? And did you tell it to your sons and grandsons and daughters and granddaughters? And have you told it to every person that you came to? Look, folks, modern medicine came out of Africa. You need to know that. Without Africa, there would be no people in America. What we call, no, I mean all of America, because we all started in Africa. Oh yeah, you need to get that. Go to this company, odtmaps.com, capital O, capital D, capital T, maps.com, and get a picture of the continent of Africa with all those different countries inside it. Get that. You can get that from the people who make the Peters projection map and hang that on your wall. And when people come in, say, there is the greatness of Africa. All of North America and several other countries would fit into the continent of Africa. That is where civilization began. And you, quite frankly, were more civilized then, and you are now, than we are in the United States of America, because we're still convinced that this skin makes us special. No, it doesn't. This is not the original color of man. You are. I'm not. I'm the faded one. I'm one of your faded relatives.
Well, Grandma, we have about 10 minutes to wrap up. And again, we are very, very gracious for your time. And let me pass over again to Dr. Manka Nkimbe. Do you have, I think you have at least two more questions for Grandma.
Yes, I do. I do have questions. The one that is really percolating right now, I'm calling you Grandma, so I know you're wise. It's really thinking about, over time, how have things changed? And do you think it's really getting better, or it's getting, how is it?
It was getting better when Barack Obama was elected. I thought, I'm never going to have to do this workshop again. People are finally catching on. It's going to be all right. And Whoopi Goldberg said, now I can put my suitcase down and I don't have to plan to leave the country anymore. And things got better, except that we had people, Mr. McCarthy and Mr. McConnell, who remind me of Charlie McCarthy and Elmer Fudd. No, Bert, the other one. Anyway, they remind me of a couple of hand puppets. And Mr. Trump has his hand up their rear end and he's moving their mouths. Since he became president, we have been in worse shape. We are in worse shape now than we were when Barack Obama was elected. And they refused to allow him to be successful. It was absolutely, I remember that so well. And it was so insane, and it still is. We were getting better. Now we've got Joe Biden, who was Obama's vice president. He knows more than people think he knows. He's had experiences that people don't realize he has had. He has learned things as a result of being second to a black male, which in itself is absolutely remarkable. And it's wonderful. And it says, wait, he was led by this black male for 8 years. And we were led by a black male for 8 years, and we were doing better. So I know that black people of color, those melanaceous and melanotic people, and those melanaceous and melanotic women have made a difference, are making a difference, will continue to make a difference if we continue to allow them to make a difference. But we've got to change this society to realize the greatness of those who are other than white, and to realize that there are no white people. There are no black people. We are all shades of brown. But as long as we call ourselves white and pure and black and savage, that's how long we'll have a problem. I realize that the term black has now become the self-image of people who are melanaceous and melanotic. Get over it. Realize that you were here first, and because of, however, the hole in the ozone layer is shrinking now. For years, it was enlarging. And as the hole in the ozone layer got larger and larger, more and more sunlight was allowed to enter our environment, and more white people died of melanoma, which is a skin cancer that you get from too much exposure to the sun. You're no protection from the sun. If we don't change our behavior and change it soon, if we keep on using fossil fuels and the hole in the ozone layer gets larger again, you're going to see more and more pale faces dying of melanoma. And as a result of them being conditioned to believe in the rightness of whiteness. By the time you are my age, you will see people of color, what we call people of color, being the numerical majority in this country as they are all over the world. Because pale faces are going to suddenly realize, oh my God, if I want my kids and grandkids and great-grandkids to survive, I've got to have some melanin in my family. And you're going to see something happen that hasn't been allowed to happen yet. And it's going to. And now black women, melanaceous women are saying, don't do that. Don't do that. I don't want to compete with those melanemic women for the few melanaceous men there are around. Wait a minute. We've got to get over the idea of interracial and get into the idea of human beings who have the right to be with those they find attractive and loving, and reproduce in a way that they will make this civilization and these human beings live longer.
Well, I like to,
this racism is going to kill us.
Yeah. I like to pause and said, you are watching African Hour, and our extraordinary guest today is Grandma Jane Elliott. Thank you again, Grandma Jane Elliott, for your wonderful wisdom. And again, I want to reassure my audience and viewers that African Hour brings the best and is balanced and fair. Over to you again, Dr. Manka.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Grandma Jane, for that. For telling us that there is, at least for me, if hearing that things at least were changing and not changing, it's encouraging, because that's indeed in the work that I am doing, and I'm hoping to continue doing in community. And I am just privileged to be in the same room as you are. And then, as you mentioned, that what we have to take away is that we have to go out and vote, because that's how we're going to begin changing the systems. I think that's the piece that a lot of people my age are always wondering. We see it, we know it, but how can I make a difference? And I think voting is something that is tangible, and we can take out and start doing and making sure that we're going out to encourage everyone that we know to vote.
But there's something else you have to do. You have to teach your children and the people that you work with to get the book by Marshall McLuhan. And I don't remember the name of it, but he said, stay away from television. It will ruin your mind. We have children. Yeah, we have children now coming to school who know nothing except what is on that little thing on their Palm Pilot or whatever it's called. Yeah, whatever. Stay away. Teach your kids to read. Insist that every child in your environment spend half half an hour of sustained silent reading every day, and get the books that Mr. What's his name in Florida has insisted come out off the shelves in the schoolrooms, get those back on the shelves in the schoolroom, and insist that children learn to read, and then read everything they can get their hands on. Encourage your children to be readers, because what they learn on the net isn't always true. If it were true, it wouldn't be there. We do not tell the truth on the net. You know that, and I know that. So make sure that every child that you know is expected to spend half an hour every day to sustained silent reading, that they're learning something that they didn't see on the television or on their Palm Pilots.
And Grandma, I think in your previous discussion a little bit, you mentioned about President Obama and President Biden. And I'm just thinking that God is just so wonderful, and we can never understand how God teaches the world. President Obama is like the son of President Biden, and he was president, and his vice president was President Biden. And what you have just explained just make me be thinking. You see, it contradicts actually what I had said earlier, that what an older person can sitting down, a younger person cannot see at the top of the Empire Building. But now this is a younger person, and of the first ever in his caliber, a black person, to be leading the most powerful country in the world.
Wait. He wasn't our first black president.
Oh, no, he wasn't. Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, who was the first black president?
Abraham Lincoln.
Oh.
Abraham Lincoln was a Melungeon. He was part white, part black, and part Cherokee Indian. And in his time in Kentucky, they called him the N-word because that was what they were. Abraham Lincoln was our first black president, admittedly black president. All the others had black, but they never admitted, but Abraham Lincoln did.
Grandma, you refresh my mind. One day in the train in Boston, someone said something which I'll bring it up for you to, because you really seem like an encyclopedia. He said, look, Abraham Lincoln was the first black president in the United States. If you I'm going to prove it to you. Look at the currency
length
of the United States. Yeah, look at the currency of the United States. Look at the dime. Look at the quarter, and look at all those change. All the presidents are facing the right. And then look at the least denominator, which is brown. That one is Abraham Lincoln. And look, he's the only president who's facing east towards Africa. Then, and say, if you want to dispute that, go to the Library of Congress. The truth is there. Then I went home, I collected all the currency. All of them are in silver. The only least currency that I line up was Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln is the only president who's facing east. Is that, I don't really know.
I think it's an accident, but it's a happy accident, because it says, here's the one that's different. Here's the one that made a big difference. Here's the one that we need to follow. You look at his facial features, look at his hair, look at the length of his arms and his legs. The man it's obvious, but we will deny it until our dying day, because we don't want to admit that the man who made the most difference, and who could have made even more, but he wanted to get reelected. So he did something that he shouldn't have, but then we shot him for it. We're just conditioned to remaining ignorant. In the play, a Shakespearean play, Julius Caesar says about Mark Antony, that man is dangerous. He thinks too much. Think of our former president. Did anybody ever say about him that man is dangerous? He thinks too much. Joe Biden is dangerous. He thinks too much. Barack Obama was dangerous. He thinks too much. And they think the right way, and they think a way that is better for the people, not only in this country, but all over the world, because people all over the world follow what happens in the United States of America.
Well, Dr. Manka, over to you again to just sum it up, and then I will give the few minutes for Grandma to give her closing remarks. But again, you are watching African Hour. It's coming to you from Lowell, Massachusetts, the all-American city.
The all United States of American city.
The all United States of American city. I am in school and I am learning from Grandma. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor to be in the same room with you, Grandma. And again, I'm going out to get that map. I am going to make sure that every child around me is learning, and I'm doing my part as an educator, the one who leads, to be able to make sure that I'm actually leading people to the right direction and not leading them to the wrong direction. And again, I'm going to make sure that.
But you also have to point out to your children and to your students the people who are leading them in the wrong direction. And you have to point out the inaccuracies and the things that are not true that they're being told. And then you have to bring the books and put them in front of them and say, now look at this. Now, these people wrote this many years ago before television. They knew what they were talking about. You need to read the truth. And you need to take, when they are in social studies class, you need to realize that what is happening in social studies class in many places in the United States is anti-social studies. Because it's anti-social to teach that only white males did valuable things in the history of the world. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you, but we have to get past social studies and realize that it's anti-social studies. Okay, I'm sorry. Shut up, Jane.
No. This is absolutely, again, just learned so much from you, and I have a lot. I was taking down notes on my phone, so I have a lot of notes. Yeah, I have a lot of notes that I was taking, and it's been an honor for me to be part of the African Hour, and especially to share space with Grandma Jane.
Well, thank you.
But Grandma Jane, there is one thing that I want really to tell you. When I watch, because I had watched you on Phil Donahue many years, watch you on my sister Oprah Winfrey, and also recently watch you on Roland Martin. I watch you very much. So to me, my philosophy is that I control my choices, and the consequences of those choices, I leave them to God. So I told my friends that I am going to see if I can get Grandma Jane Elliott on my show. Say, are you crazy? Try, let's see. And when I wrote my first letter to my email to you, I was not expecting a reply. When your response to me uplifted me and just showed how down to earth you are. So you are not just talking, you are practicing what you're talking. And you inspired me so much. You inspired my children. And I hope also that you've inspired my viewers and my audience, and particularly people who look like me, not only from Africa, because people who look like me don't only reside in Africa, but around the world, that we are all a human race, and that the idea of interracial marriage is just a thought
Ridiculous.
In some few. Yes.
Ridiculous.
So Grandma, as we are wrapping down, I would like to thank God for your presence and your humility, and that you are teaching me and my children and even the younger generation that humility really pays.
May I say one more thing?
Yes.
My father said, you know the difference between right and wrong. Now do the right thing, goddammit. You know the difference between right and wrong. Do the right thing. If it costs you, you're still doing the right thing. And that is what my father told me. And the first time he saw the film of The Exercise, this 60-year-old man, 61-year-old man, stood up, took his red handkerchief out of his back pocket, blew his nose, wiped his eyes, and said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." He was still learning at the age of 60.
That is wisdom.
That he had wisdom. He had wisdom, and that's where mine comes from. Thank you very much. I have another podcast to go, so I have to leave, okay?
Thank you very much, Grandma. They say common sense is not common, but thank you. You have actually given us so much to think about. And again, Grandma, may God Almighty bless you, give you good health and happiness. And Grandma, your smile is contagious, and that is what I will take with me. So, on that note, we are honored again on African Hour, coming to you from Lowell, Massachusetts, and it is a privilege and an honor to be with Grandma Jane Elliott. So we thank God for your presence, Grandma. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been cursed by the worst, and today blessed by the best once again.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.